Welcome to The Explainer. You know, we hear it all the time. Just be yourself. But what if that simple advice is actually the most courageous and maybe the most terrifying thing we can do? Today, we're diving into the ideas of Erich Fromm, a psychoanalyst who spent his life exploring just that, the courage it takes to be truly human. So let's start with a question that really haunted Fromm and shaped his entire life's work. What if our greatest fear is freedom itself? I mean, think about that for a second. It's a question that kind of shakes the foundations of our modern world.
All right, so to really get Fromm's big ideas, we first need to get the man himself. His search for answers wasn't just some academic exercise. No, it was deeply personal, sparked by a couple of really traumatic events that set him on a lifelong quest.
So picture this. Fromm is just a kid, only 12 years old. And a young family friend, she takes her own life. And the reason? So she can be buried next to her deceased father. This shocking, kind of irrational act of devotion just blew a young Fromm's mind. It was the first thing that really pushed him to look into the hidden, messy parts of the human psyche, and that led him right to Sigmund Freud.
And then, just a few years after that, came World War I. You know, that personal shock was suddenly amplified on a global scale. The sheer insanity of it all, the destruction, it cemented his life's mission. He had to figure out the terrifying irrationality of mass human behavior. For him, this wasn't just a puzzle. It was an emergency.
Okay, so how do you even begin to tackle a question that huge? Well, Fromm started by building a pretty unique intellectual toolkit. He didn't just stick to one way of thinking. He pulled from a few different really powerful traditions to forge a new set of tools. He looked at three key influences. First, the Hebrew prophets, where he got this idea of radical humanism and universal peace. Then Karl Marx, who gave him the keys to understanding society, history, and economics. And finally, Sigmund Freud, who provided the map to the individual's inner world. But here's the cool part. He didn't just, pick and choose, he wove them together. He believed you absolutely had to understand both the individual and the society they live in to really get what makes us tick. And you can see this journey play out in his life. He's born in Germany in 1900. By 1918, he's totally traumatized by the end of World War I. He gets his PhD, and then in 1930, he joins the now famous Frankfurt School. But then, in a crazy twist of fate, he has to flee the very thing he's trying to understand, the rise of Nazism. He escapes to the United States in 1934, and that's where he really makes his mark.
And all this leads to his big idea, his unique method, psychoanalytic social psychology. That's a mouthful, I know, but it's basically this. He combined Freud's psychoanalysis with Marxist social critique. It was a brand new way to look at how big societal forces, economics, politics, you name it, actually get inside our heads and shape our individual characters.
So Fromm's in America now. And with the shadow of Nazism looming over everything, he publishes his first major breakthrough work. It's a book that basically explains the very crisis that forced him to leave his home in the first place.
Okay, so here's his core thesis. In his book, Escape from Freedom, he argues that modern humanity is freed from all those traditional bonds. The church, the king, the village. But that freedom has left us, well, isolated, alone, and frankly, terrified. We gain freedom from things, but we haven't yet figured out what to be free for.
And this fear, this burden of freedom, leads people to look for an escape. This is where he comes up with his idea of the authoritarian character. This is an individual who basically tries to escape freedom by submitting to a new authority. They find security by just becoming a part of something bigger and more powerful than themselves. It's like a psychological bargain. I'll give up my freedom if you take away this anxiety.
And Fromm saw three main ways we do this, three paths of escape. The first is authoritarianism, which we just talked about, fusing with someone or something else to feel strong. The second is pretty dark, destructiveness, basically trying to destroy the world that makes you feel so threatened. And the third one, this one might hit close to home, is what he called automaton conformity. That's just become exactly like everyone else, a carbon copy, so you never ever have to feel alone or different.
But here's the thing. Fromm wasn't just about diagnosing the problem. He wasn't a pessimist. He spent the rest of his career working on the prescription, on the cure. He wanted to show us how to get from this diagnosis to a sane life.
He had this vision for what he called a sane society. And what did that mean? Well, it's a society that actually serves real human needs, our need for connection, for purpose, instead of just serving the needs of some economic or political system. It's a world that overcomes that feeling of alienation.
And what's really interesting is how he boiled this down to two basic ways of living. On one hand, you've got the biographical person, the lover of life, of growth, of reason. This is someone who's all about productive love and creativity. And on the other hand, you have the necrophilous person, the lover of death, decay, and control, someone fascinated by all the things that aren't alive. For Fromm, this was the fundamental choice we all make.
He really digs into this in his bestseller, The Art of Loving. He argues that love isn't something you just fall into, like in the movies. No way. It's an art. It's something you have to practice. It's an attitude, a character orientation that determines how you relate to, well, everything, not just one person. It's about care, responsibility, and respect.
All right, let's move on to his final big work. This is where he really distills his entire philosophy down to one single, powerful choice for every single one of us.
He laid out two modes of existence. First, there's the having mode. This is I am what I have. My value is all about my stuff, my status, what I control. It's a life built on consumption. Then there's the being mode. This is I am what I am. Here, your value is based on your ability to love, to share, to create, to just be present. It's a life of authentic experience. Fromm's point was that modern society pushes us hard toward that having mode.
So here's his final challenge to us. We have to choose. Are we going to live a life that's centered on possessing things, or a life that's centered on the richness of our own being? And for him, this isn't just some abstract idea. It's the most practical choice there is. It defines everything. And so Fromm leaves us with a question that brings his whole life's work full circle. He started by trying to understand irrationality, and he ends by asking us to rationally look at our own lives. So which mode defines your life? It's a question that asks us to find that courage to be human, and it feels more urgent now than maybe ever before.